Something about the house on Charlotte Street in Kansas City never seemed unusual. It sat quietly among the other homes on the block. A normal street, normal neighbors, cars parked along the sidewalks, children riding bicycles in the afternoons. From the outside, the small brick house looked no different from any other home in the neighborhood. People passed it every day without giving it a second thought. But behind the walls of that house, something dark had been unfolding for years. Young men entered that house. Some came looking for money, some came looking for drugs, some were simply looking for a place to stay. But many of them never left. And the man who lived inside that quiet home was a man named Robert Berdella. To the people who knew him casually, he didn't seem dangerous at all. He appeared soft-spoken, polite, and slightly eccentric. The kind of person who collected strange objects and had unusual interests. He owned a booth at a local flea market where he sold odd antiques and unusual items. Things like animal skulls, exotic artifacts, and occult-themed decorations. Customers remembered him as friendly. Some even described him as generous. But the life Robert Berdella showed to the outside world was only a small part of who he really was. Behind closed doors, he had been building a secret life filled with control, manipulation, and cruelty. And for years, no one suspected what was happening. Robert Andrew Berdella Jr. was born on January 31st, 1949, in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. His early childhood did not appear extraordinary, but people who later studied his life noticed that many pieces of the puzzle began forming long before his crimes started. Berdella grew up in a strict household. His father was deeply religious and believed in strong discipline. Mistakes were often met with punishment, and emotional warmth was not something Robert experienced often. As a child, Robert struggled socially. He suffered from severe vision problems and had to wear thick glasses. This made him stand out at school, and he became an easy target for bullying. Classmates teased him and isolated him. Over time, he began withdrawing into his own world. Instead of spending time with friends, he spent hours reading books about strange subjects, ancient rituals, occult beliefs, and unusual philosophies. Isolation slowly became his comfort zone. When Robert was 16 years old, a major event changed his life. His father suddenly died from a heart attack. For many teenagers, the loss of a parent can be devastating. For Robert Berdella, it seemed to deepen the emotional distance he already felt from the world around him. Those who later analyzed his life believe this moment pushed him even further inward. After graduating from high school, Berdella enrolled at the Kansas City Art Institute. At first, it seemed like a promising path. He showed interest in art and creativity, and the environment allowed him to explore unconventional ideas. But during this time, Berdella also became involved with drugs. He experimented with LSD and other substances, and his behavior began to change. Friends noticed that he became increasingly strange and unpredictable. Eventually, the school expelled him. After leaving the institute, Berdella decided to stay in Kansas City. In the 1970s, he slowly built a life for himself in the city. He bought a house at 4315 Charlotte Street. He began working at flea markets, selling unusual antiques and strange curiosities. The booth he ran became popular among collectors who were interested in the bizarre: skulls, animal bones, occult items, exotic artifacts. Berdella seemed to have a fascination with the strange and the macabre. Yet to many people, he was simply a quirky businessman. Neighbors saw him as quiet but polite. He kept mostly to himself, but would occasionally chat with people nearby. Nothing about his behavior raised serious alarm, but inside his house, Robert Berdella had begun developing disturbing fantasies about control over other people. These fantasies slowly grew stronger, and eventually, they crossed the line into reality. By the early 1980s, Berdella began targeting vulnerable young men. Most of them were people who lived on the edges of society, runaways, or individuals struggling with addiction, people who might not immediately be missed, people whose disappearances might not receive much attention. Berdella would approach them with offers that sounded harmless. Sometimes he offered money for small jobs, sometimes he offered drugs, Sometimes he simply offered a place to rest for the night. Once they entered his house, everything changed. Investigators later learned that Berdella would drug his victims. When they lost consciousness, he restrained them. Some victims were kept captive for days, others for even longer. One of the most disturbing discoveries in the case came after police searched the house. Berdella had kept detailed journals, page after page of handwritten notes. These notes documented everything he did: times, dates, reactions, how long victims remained alive. The entries read like cold experiments. To Berdella, the victims were not people, they were subjects. Objects to control, objects to dominate. One of the first known victims connected to him was Jerry Howell. Howell disappeared in 1984. Friends later told police that Howell had been spending time with Berdella before he vanished. Police briefly questioned Berdella at the time, but without physical evidence or witnesses, the investigation went nowhere. Then another man disappeared. Robert Sheldon vanished in 1985. Once again, people reported that Sheldon had been seen near Berdella's house. Again, suspicion existed, but nothing could be proven. The disappearances continued, yet the quiet house on Charlotte Street remained undisturbed. Inside, Berdella continued living two completely different lives. During the day, he sold antiques and chatted with customers. At night, his hidden world continued. What investigators later discovered inside the house revealed how organized he had been. He kept supplies prepared: ropes, chemicals, various tools, everything arranged and ready. It showed that these acts were not random. They were planned, carefully controlled. For years, the secret remained hidden, until one morning in April 1988. On April 2nd, something finally went wrong. A man named Tracy Edwards suddenly appeared running through the neighborhood. He was nearly naked. A dog collar was fastened around his neck. His hands were injured and bleeding. Terrified, he ran to a nearby house and begged the residents to call the police. When officers arrived, Edwards told them a shocking story. He said he had been held captive for days inside the house on Charlotte Street. He described the man who had done it: Robert Berdella. Police immediately went to the house. When Berdella answered the door, he appeared calm, almost too calm. But once officers stepped inside, they began noticing disturbing details. The house was cluttered with strange items, there was an unusual smell, and certain objects raised immediate concern. During the search, officers discovered Berdella's journals. As they began reading them, the reality of the situation became clear. This was not just a case of kidnapping. The notebooks described multiple victims, detailed timelines of captivity, descriptions of abuse. Investigators realized they were dealing with something far more serious: a serial killer. Police quickly obtained a search warrant and began a deeper investigation of the property. In the backyard, officers started digging. What they found confirmed their worst fears: human remains buried in the soil, fragments of bones, evidence that several people had died there. News of the discovery spread quickly across Kansas City. Neighbors were stunned. For years they had lived beside this quiet man who sold antiques and greeted them politely, and all along, something unimaginable had been happening behind his walls. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Berdella eventually confessed. He admitted that several men had died in his house. He described how he lured them there, how he kept them captive, how the situation escalated until the victims died. But what shocked investigators even more than the crimes themselves was Berdella's attitude. He spoke about the events calmly, emotionlessly, as if he were describing a technical project rather than human lives. There was no visible remorse, no emotional reaction, just cold explanations. The case quickly became one of the most disturbing investigations in the history of Kansas City. The journals alone revealed the horrifying timeline of his crimes. Rather than face a long trial and the possibility of the death penalty, Berdella agreed to a plea deal. In 1988, he pleaded guilty to multiple counts of murder. The court sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families of the victims, the sentencing brought some closure. But many questions remained unanswered. Some investigators believed there might have been more victims who were never identified. Others wondered how Berdella had managed to operate for so many years without being caught. The house on Charlotte Street, eventually became one of the most infamous crime scenes in the city's history. Robert Berdella was transferred to the Missouri State Penitentiary. Even in prison, reports suggested he showed little remorse for what he had done. Then, on October 8, 1992, just 4 years after his conviction, Robert Berdella died of a heart attack inside his prison cell. He was only 43 years old. His death closed the legal chapter of the case, but the story of the crimes that took place inside that quiet house continues to disturb people even today. Because the most chilling part of the story is not just what happened inside those walls. It's the fact that for years, the man responsible appeared completely ordinary. A neighbor, a small business owner, a polite man selling antiques at a flea market, living a normal life in plain sight, until the moment one terrified victim escaped and finally revealed the truth. And sometimes, the most terrifying secrets are not hidden in dark forests or abandoned buildings. Sometimes they exist in quiet neighborhoods, inside ordinary houses, right next door.